Olá, esse é o programa Academia em Debate da Chancelaria da Universidade Presbiteriana Mackenzie. É uma alegria estarmos de volta aí no seu televisor, compartilhando verdades e conhecimentos da nossa sociedade, da nossa cultura e da academia da perspectiva da fé cristã reformada. No programa de hoje nós temos o privilégio de receber o Dr. David Powlison. Dr. David Powlison tem doutorado em História da Ciência e Medicina, com especialização em História da Psiquiatria. Ele tem atuado no mundo inteiro, falando a respeito da relação entre psicologia e cristianismo e defendido a possibilidade e a necessidade de uma visão de mundo cristão por detrás do nosso tratamento das dificuldades e do sofrimento do ser humano. Dr. Powlison, muito bem-vindo ao nosso programa. Eu gostaria de começar lhe fazendo uma pergunta. Por que é que esse relacionamento entre psicologia e cristianismo parece ser um relacionamento tão hostil?
That is a very interesting question. And historically, the hostility started from the psychology side. Christianity had been the home of psychology and back through all the centuries. And in the United States of America, William James, who was at Harvard, was the founder, pioneer of empirical psychology. He actually borrowed his empirical methodology from Jonathan Edwards, the great preacher in New England. And Edwards had been a very careful student of human experience. He had the way he had gathered information very much impressed James. And Edwards' most famous book had been a treatise on religious affections, and William James essentially took up the same topic, but he took it up stripping out all the Christianity, which obviously Jonathan Edwards was speaking as a Christian, and neutralizing the Christianity, William James sought to come at a more neutral, universal sense of religious experience. And that stripping away of what had been essential to a Christian psychology was actually, I think you could point to as the starting point. And then you can see how in that the Christian church has at least an ambivalent reaction to something which would seek to take away their own distinctives while maintaining some of their methodology.
Uhum. Para muita gente para muitos cristãos, especialmente aqueles que estão trabalhando na área de aconselhamento, a psicologia é uma ferramenta totalmente secularizada e insuficiente. Por outro lado, eles querem usar somente a Bíblia para ajudar as pessoas a saírem dos seus traumas e dos seus problemas. O senhor consideraria que a Bíblia somente é suficiente para o tratamento das neuroses, dos problemas e da depressão das pessoas?
The Bible is not a textbook or a handbook not only on neurosis and depression and so forth. It's not a textbook on anything except the ways of God with a fallen humanity. And that said, the Bible teaches us the elemental principles of what a human being is, what goes wrong with us, who God is, how it is that we are restored to life and purpose. And the Bible intends to give us, the Bible is not an encyclopedia that would contain all facts. It gives us a lens, a set of eyeglasses with which we go and look at all facts. And so, referring to what I said a minute ago about Jonathan Edwards, Edwards was noticing things particular to his era in the 1740s. He was being a good empiricist, but he was looking at that world through Christian eyes that had been structured, formed in terms of their interpretive gaze by the Scripture. And the same thing is true of us today. And so when you look at something like depression or what would be called neurosis, those are human experiences that in our time and place have been given those labels. But what are the experiences? What are the things that go into them? What happens to people? What is going on inside them? How are they behaving? What are they feeling? Those are concrete things that a Christian is as interested as anybody else in seeking to look at, know about, and then to make sense of. And that sense is going to the sense that we would make is going to be formed by our understanding of the Bible and what it says about people.
Se a gente for usar a Bíblia para tentar entender o sofrimento humano e a dor humana, nós vamos encontrar o conceito de pecado. Na sua opinião, esse conceito de que o ser humano é um pecador deveria ser levado em consideração quando nós analisamos as causas da sua depressão, dos seus problemas mentais?
If you're going to be true to reality, you must take sin into account in everything. I mean, in our conversation here, sin could be coming account if we were afraid of each other or seeking to impress each other, and those are not, sin is not just I take out a hatchet and I seek to hit you, you know. It's subtle things like the way we orient to other people. It's fears we have, things we're ashamed of. It's desires that rule us that we're not even aware that they are fundamentally self-centered and egotistical, narcissistic. I think that probably the single biggest hindrance to people understanding why a Christian approach to deep life problems that considers sin to be an essential part, why people don't understand that is that most people's view of sin is that it consists solely of conscious, willfully chosen actions where I considered the alternatives and I chose to do something wicked. Now, that is one kind of sin, the high-handed sins. But most sin, in the way the Bible portrays it, is like a form of madness. It is like a neurosis. It's like being drunk. It's like sleepwalking. It's simply who we are that is distorted.
Uhum. Uma das pessoas que mais contribuiu na história da psicologia para eliminar o conceito de pecado no tratamento das pessoas foi o famoso Sigmund Freud. Nós vamos falar a respeito dele já, depois do nosso intervalo. Estamos de volta com a Academia em Debate, hoje com o Dr. David Paulison falando sobre psicologia e cristianismo. No bloco anterior, nós tratamos da questão do conceito do pecado no aconselhamento das pessoas e no tratamento daqueles que estão sofrendo. E eu mencionei o nome do famoso Sigmund Freud. Eu queria então perguntar agora a Dr. Paulison. Dr. Paulison, em que sentidos a ideia de Freud de que isso que nós chamamos de pecado, na verdade, nada mais eram do que desejos legítimos que foram suprimidos pelas tradições, pelos dogmas religiosos, até que ponto isso tem ajudado ou não no tratamento das pessoas?
You know, Freud is a very honest man about the perverse things that are going on inside a person. I mean, he's obviously been accused even of being a bit perverted in his own curiosity. But I would say that he saw many things about the perversity of eroticism, the just deep irrational hostilities that people feel, the powerful experiences of anxiety, shame, guilt, punishing sense of failure. And those are all things that I believe are symptomatic of that deep Christian view of the sinfulness, fallenness, and brokenness of the human heart. Now, the reason Freud is not only does not call them sin and is unable to see them as sin is because he is an atheist. And sin is a category that locates us in relationship to God. And so Freud, I would say that one of the ways I might interpret Freud is that he came out of a culture that was very confident in human rationality and human volition and was not aware of the deep, dark secrets inside. So in one sense, you could say Freud rediscovered sin, but because he didn't believe in sin, he called it something else.
O senhor mencionou aí o fato de que o próprio Freud teria lutado contra desejos profundos e que ele também era ateu. Isso significa dizer que aquilo que uma pessoa acredita e aquilo que ela experimenta acaba de alguma maneira influenciando o modelo psicológico que ela adota?
Yes, I think one of the most helpful ways to look at psychological models, it's not the only way, but it's a helpful way to help locate them, is to view psychological models as having an essential autobiographical component. So Freud saw in himself deep, dark, perverse impulses. Carl Jung, his first disciple and the first heretic from the movement, saw in himself, though he was post-Christian like Freud, he saw a deep longing for some kind of spiritual, moral meaning to life, some bigger meaning. Freud didn't really care about bigger meaning. He was a very pragmatic, medical doctor sort of person. Jung was a mystic. Alfred Adler, in the second great heretic and the third great psychologist, had been very sick, a weak person. He'd been Jewish and prejudiced against. He struggled with deep sense of inferiority and saw in himself passions to try to prove himself and compensate. Well, you look at those personal narratives and you see how much the person's story shapes the kinds of things that they look at. Now, Freud, Jung, and Adler each claimed that they were offering an objective, scientific view of human nature. And it is interesting how, looked at with a century of hindsight, there are very few people among modern psychologists who are actually, strictly speaking, Freudian, Jungian, or Adlerian. In other words, they don't share the same biography. They might adopt certain styles of thinking from those early authors, but they too bring their own biography into it.
Uhum. Esses três exemplos que o senhor nos deu aí, eles deixam muito claro, de fato, que essas abordagens psicológicas, elas variam muito de indivíduo para indivíduo, dependendo da experiência que o seu proponente tem. E no próprio livro que o senhor acaba de lançar, em português, Uma Nova Visão, está escrito aqui no subtítulo que é o aconselhamento e a condição humana através das lentes da Escritura. Então, essa ideia de lentes, de óculos, olhar a realidade a partir de um determinado ponto de vista, ilustrado com os três exemplos que o senhor deu, não levaria à conclusão de que não existe uma maneira única, correta de se olhar para o ser humano e tentar ajudá-lo? E como nós defenderíamos que a visão cristã é a visão correta contra estas outras visões e modelos que nos são apresentados?
That is a great question. And I'll be personal for a moment here. I did not become a Christian until I was 26 years old. I studied psychology at Harvard. I was very interested in Neo-Freudianism, interested in Jung, interested in Abraham Maslow, Karen Horney, and I was bringing my own narrative, my own story, in what I would pick and choose from the various psychologists that happened to strike my fancy. I didn't like B.F. Skinner. I did like Freud. I did like Maslow. And what I would say that the Bible gives is actually the only possibility of not being relativistic, because you might say that I came with my yellow-colored glasses of my David Powlison experience, and Freud had his purple glasses, and Adler has his green glasses. And the Bible takes off your glasses and gives you a different set, and you come to understand yourself, the meaning of suffering, why you do what you do, the purpose of life, in a way that there is nothing. Every psychological model invented, you might say, from below, always has anomalies. There are things it can't account for. That's why the theories have a shelf life. They live and then they die. Scripture accounts for everything. Just all of the contradictions, the fact that human beings are both wonderful and tragic, both have such good intentions and are so perverse. The Scripture explains that, and there's and many other seeming antinomies in the nature of human existence. And so I would view it that the Bible gives us the only clear set of glass with which to look at reality, the way the God who made it, who judges it, who entered this reality to save it, that's how he sees it. And that's what makes me a Christian, and a strong believer that I didn't make this up, and the Christian faith is not relativistic.
Muito bem. Diariamente, dezenas de pessoas entram em instituições de saúde mental numa condição tal que os psicólogos modernos chamariam de profundamente perturbadas, mas que pastores evangélicos diriam eles estão possuídos por um demônio. Existe possessão demoníaca? Aquilo que se considera possessão demoníaca é, na verdade, uma doença mental ou vice-versa? É o que nós veremos no próximo bloco.